Hey Sid, how you doing?
Hey Melanie, great, thanks, and yourself?
I'm alright, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking to me. I'm sorry about last night. We had untold drama here with our internet. We've had so many DS server attacks in the last month or so. It's been a bit chaotic. But thank you for your time, and most importantly, thank you for what you're doing. And I really want to learn a little bit about you and your story, because one of the most amazing things I'm learning about all these wonderful people I've met, particularly coming together in South Africa and doing this, is they all have such interesting stories. So I'm after yours.
Well, I don't know if mine is quite as interesting.
Well, let's see.
I think mine grows very much out of the last 15 years, where I've studied a lot about society and our history and everything in general. And it led really to the point where I became quite disillusioned with civilization as it is. And from that, you know, when we started up the eco community, I decided, well, I'm actually going to opt out of society. Unbeknownst to me, that 2 months after moving to the farm, I met a fellow by the name of Dr. Johan Jabé, who had just started the free man movement. So I did some study into that. I became involved. I then went and tested out the system to determine jurisdiction. And this I did by changing my number plates, putting a license disc on that said exempt from levy. I was subsequently pulled off probably around 10 to 15 times by various policemen, and was confronted by 3 different traffic chiefs from 3 different jurisdictions, who eventually proved to me that jurisdiction does exist within law. Because the last time was one of the traffic chiefs that drove out on the highway by 20 kilometers to come and see me because I refused to get out of my car. And he was standing at the window swearing at me and threatening to get the police out to come and haul me out of my car and arrest me because I wouldn't get out of the car and step into his jurisdiction, and he actually used those words. So from that I also realized that, you know, I do support the free man movement in principle, but by just letting people do these things, they're stepping into a domain that they know nothing about, and they can very easily land up in jail or have injury bestowed on them. This is the problem with being free. I think I then stopped doing that because of the realization that to be free, firstly, takes place in your mind, and secondly, it comes with a whole lot of responsibility. People think free, okay, free needs to be defined, and it also means that everything you do, you are accountable to yourself and to the people around you, and you are fully responsible. So it means you cannot now drive fast because you can endanger the lives of others. You can't just go and beat somebody up because you are accountable for your actions, and you can be held accountable for your actions. It goes back to to natural law, I should say. And of course, then with that, we started discovering a lot more about the financial systems in the world, and from that grew New Era and all the work that Scott Cundley is doing with New Era. And at the same time, I met Michael Tillinger, and he was busy at the time getting the petition together for his Ubuntu party. And well, here we are now with the OPPT, and we've got a whole lot of these groups of people doing things. But I really became quite reclusive on the farm for the last couple of years, where I would literally really, you know, spend not more than an hour or 2 a week talking to people. I withdrew from society, but I did continue researching. And I came to the eventual conclusion, you know, with all these people out there doing things, most people think that we cannot make a difference. But, you know, just being on these databases, paying attention to what is going out there, learning, we have a growing number of people around the world doing things, as you, and the same with you. I mean, I think you've been doing it a lot longer actively than I have.
When did you start, Sid? When were you actively starting this sort of thing?
Sorry?
When did you actually actively start this?
Well, I started working on it about a couple of months ago, because what I looked at was the jurisdiction. What are the things that are actually keeping people enslaved? Why are things not changing? Why are they not able to change? And from the experience through all the new era court cases that I've been observing, and again now from the OPPT, one can clearly see that there are basically the factors of money control, and you've got jurisdiction control. And the governments and the powers that be that belong to these fiction organizations or corporations that are really just actually paper documents have been granted over the years legal rights. They have been given the right over the people that actually created them. And are we going to change? Why do they keep on ignoring these things? I admire the work that Heather has done and all the other people that have come before. But ultimately, we have to take away the ability for government to deny what is actually going on. And this is why I got started on this now, looking at the jurisdictions as well and the laws, because there are no laws or facts that can be tried in a court of law. And this is clearly shown when you have a look at how the court cases are tried going through New Era. The judges actually ignore the facts. The laws are hypothetical. They're open to interpretation. And they will actually rule according to whichever way they have decided. And they ignore the evidence completely. Then we have people like David Miller with quantum language past syntax grammar, who has mathematically proven that the laws say nothing about nothing. He often talks about no law or fact shall be tried in a court of law, but this is, people say, okay, now this is the judge's oath. It's not really the judge's oath. It's just that there are no facts within law. And it's a manipulation of the whole legal system in order to keep people enslaved and in order to gain control of situations. You also have the situation, if you have two people that are not represented by corporations going into a court of law, yes, you can get some form of justice out of that. When it comes to person against corporation, the corporations will always win. This has been a typical scenario. And then also looking at the money crisis around the world. I mean, all over things are collapsing. And people say, no, but okay, we are reliant on paper money, we need to continue that way. But if you go back on the history of paper money, to the time of 1300 years ago when Marco Polo was in China, and there they had fiat paper money, through to 1690 in America, where again, the money wasn't based on anything, but it was just created out of thin air. And to France, twice in the 1700s, through to later day Germany in the 1920s. We've got current day Zimbabwe. And so we have, again, a monetary system that is based on nothing. And every time what bailed out these monetary systems was when they actually based it on gold again, and when they linked it to a particular metal, or precious metal, I should say. And we are just going down that same tube, and everybody ignores it. I listen to things like, you look at the OPPT. If I look at the world population and all the rest of it, then they still represent, although they're growing, but they still represent a certain portion, and the governments and the banks and everybody are just ignoring that. Nothing concrete is coming from that. So that is where my idea came from, was to notify government about what is actually going on, so that they cannot claim plausible deniability later on. Because if we can create a situation where the people know that they know, then they can't hide behind corporation protection anymore. From that moment on, they are now accountable for their actions, whether they like to acknowledge this or not. And that is how I started getting involved with this, because I've just been looking at how can I possibly make a difference in this whole scenario. And that is why I've now notified the government. And it's been quite interesting, because the document that I sent to government about a week or so ago, that has already arrived with them, because this morning, in the early hours of this morning at about 1 o'clock, I started releasing this information to the public for the first time. There were only a handful of people that know about it. And when I started releasing it to the public, I then went on. In the document, there are particular links giving reference to certain places, like reports that were on Forbes and The Guardian, Mail, and places like that. And when I went on this morning, there were 3 of the media companies that had reported on these things earlier, where the links had now been disabled. So you go on, it takes you onto the media company's website, and the link's no longer there. And the 4th one was with the Universal Postal Union, because I showed the connection between the Universal Postal Union and the United Nations. Because again, a lot of our laws and control come through the UPU and the UN. And even on the UPU site, that particular link does not attach. And yet all the other links in the document are still working fine. And this comes down to media control again. And it also shows that the government are now aware of the document. They don't have plausible deniability anymore, because they have actually gone, since receiving this document in the last few days, they have now made sure that those links within my document have been disabled and people cannot see those actual reports anymore. I do have some of those reports actually on my computer, which I will make available again. But this is the devious nature of what is actually going on. And what I'm trying to do here is, I know that they will probably not come and talk to us at this point in time. But when we apply enough pressure, eventually they're going to have to. They cannot deny the people. They're coming up for election in April next year. And when the people get to know that they know what is actually going on, and they are not representing the interests of the people, it now just starts applying more pressure to them to acknowledge what is actually taking place around the world. Yes, they have been foreclosed, and they cannot deny it, and they cannot say, well, from this moment on, whatever benefits and privileges they derive, they have, the people actually have the right of taking it away from them if they do not come to the table and start negotiating and bringing out, disclosing all these lies that we've been involved, or that they have been involved in, and then looking at ways of rectifying that.
Now, Sid, let's look at South Africa, which to me is the most extreme and obvious example of what is wrong with the planet, having the largest gap between rich and poor. We've known for many years, I mean, it's commonly obvious, and it's a known fact that South Africa has the most openly corrupt government in the world. They know, we know, they know, we know.
Yes.
What do you reckon that getting them to acknowledge more liability in the long term is going to do?
Well, the mere fact that they know that we now have given them some of this background information so that they can't get away from it. As the movements grow, and they will, because more and more people are actually getting involved. And as this develops, it's going to force them into a situation eventually where they cannot deny it anymore. And enough people will actually start standing up. You know, we have 50 million people in this country.
Sure.
And when I've spoken to a lot of the people around the country, black, white, colored, Indian, and you find that a lot of them are starting to acknowledge, yes, life is not becoming easier. These are the things that they need to accept. And once they realize what is actually going on, there are trade union movements that can get involved. This is how they started breaking the back of government, of the old apartheid government, was through the development of trade unions. There are ex-activists within the ANC, now retired, that are very disillusioned with government and don't like what is actually happening. And I mean, it all goes through to our leaders. What example is Jacob Zuma setting to this country? You know, there are moral issues around it that affect the decisions that all our children and stuff one day make. And I don't have all the answers, Mel, but I know that every person that gets involved and that starts creating an awareness can have an impact, and does have an impact.
Totally agree with that. I know, I mean, I just know just from little old me here at my computer what I've done and the reach that I've had, you know.
Yes.
So I know just for myself, and I know that if everybody else just put that little bit of effort in, we could absolutely change the world.
I mean, I was actually dumbfounded by your video on the Boers, because especially the Australian guy that you'd actually interviewed.
Yeah.
I could not. I mean, I'm fairly open-minded, but I found it difficult to come to terms with the fact that the Aborigine people had been reclassified as plants. You know,
not reclassified, they had always been classified up until the 90s as fauna and flora.
As fauna. I mean, up until, I think you said it was 1988, when the law was actually abolished, reclassifying them now as humans.
Yeah.
And I don't think there are many people around the world that are actually aware of things like that.
No. You see, South Africa got it so badly in the international press, which is what I really try to express with my film, is that the power of the corporate-controlled media to destroy a country, which is what it did to South Africa, because South Africa was nowhere near as bad as what some of the other countries were doing, yet no attention was paid to them. And that was the whole point I was trying to illustrate, is that I'm not saying what we did was right, I'm not saying it was wrong. What I'm saying is that it certainly wasn't as bad as other people, yet we got all the attention.
Exactly. And people that were doing far worse were actually being, that was covered up completely, and they were still being supported.
Yeah.
And why did that happen? I mean, people also look at our Reserve Bank system and they say, well, we're not part of the Federal Reserve. But I mean, all you have to do is look at some of the excellent things going on there. And if you have a look at old Carroll Quigley, I don't know if you've ever read his book.
Yes, I have. Carroll Quigley, Professor Quigley.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you look at Carroll Quigley, and he clearly shows the links between Cecil John Rhodes and Milner in the early part of the century, and how they were integrally involved. And with the development of the Beers and Anglo-American in the 1800s, and how that system was then introduced, the Federal Reserve System from America was introduced into Africa. We were the first African country to accept the American Federal Reserve System back in 1921, and then of course the Child Registration Act that came along in 1923. Where they knew a long time before the fact that they were going to abolish gold. That was the whole plan. And as early, I mean, America's gold standard, I think, was abolished in 1933 with the development of the Bank of International Settlements. And again, the Bank of International Settlements goes back to the OPPT. There they show the clear links around that. And eventually, it is through our birth registrations, we have now become trusts, and we are now tradable entities. We have now got a corporate identity, which the government can now trade through the Securities and Exchange Commissions in Washington, D.C. And the lies are so big that it is very difficult for people to actually come to terms with it. But all the evidence is there. And yet it is denied. I think South Africa in 1921 was only the fourth country outside of the European countries in America that introduced the central banking system. And that was a private enterprise. What gives private companies the right to control our monetary systems and our lives? And, you know, withdrawing money, people, a lot of economists are taught in our educational institutions, you all know, the cycles of recession and so on these are cyclical, but they're not. They are actually instituted by withdrawing money out of circulation, creating a recession, and then after that, it puts a lot of companies in trouble, and that gives them the ability to start buying up those companies. And even so, it's not about owning everything, it's about controlling. How do you control? That is how all of these things have come about, which is clear from and that's another report that went missing on this document. Where I did a hyperlink on that document is the report where they talk about Harry Oppenheimer controlling Anglo-American with only 8% of the shares. I then also mentioned guys like James B. Gladfield, who is a Swedish scientist, and he with a team of other guys used supercomputers, and a couple of years ago they came out with a report that showed, I think it was around 80 or 87% of the world's wealth was controlled, not owned, but controlled by 1,318 companies. And that these companies were controlled by about 147 companies which had invested interest in each other. So when people start looking in the right places, they find the right answers. And I mean, with our fiat paper currency at the moment, every single one, historically, every single time fiat paper currency has been introduced, it has actually failed. But it has given people control of certain things. It has given certain minority or exclusive groups control over these things. So, yes, I look at these things, and all I can say is I can only do the best to my ability and try and make this public and try and get the government into a position where they have to be held accountable.
I absolutely admire that, and think that's definitely the right attitude to have. I think the practical reality of it is, having done this for some time, Sid, I mean, I've been understanding Freeman law for like over 4 years now, and I've seen people come, I've seen people go, and I've seen people try all sorts of things. The reality is that our government is bought and paid for by powers outside of our country. Who they are is up for debate. I discussed in my documentary. They are never going to change because they themselves have to fulfill a certain agenda that's not decided by them. This is it. And this is my concern, is that it doesn't matter how much pressure we put on them. Ultimately, if they don't do what they're told, they're taken out.
Yeah, this is it. But I also feel the fact that people don't know what's going on.
Yes.
Once people know what's going on, and the government knows that the people know, it opens the door. That is why I've created what I call an invitation to dialogue. A lot of the ministers, I accept that there are a lot of people that go into government that actually have very, very good intentions. Then they land up in government, and then the reality hits them. Well, they find, whoa, we are not in control. You know, we are actually being controlled, and we're helpless, because all that happens is those that are in control, be it the international banks, be it the Crown, the Vatican, or whoever is controlling them, they threaten them and say, right, if you don't toe the line, we will remove our banks. We will close our banks, shut down. We'll shut down your economy. Millions of people will die. Okay, that's the fear. That they're going to lose, that everybody will lose, because a lot of their intentions are good initially. Then suddenly they find they are sucked into this corporate control mechanism, and they cannot tell the people, they cannot openly, because the media is controlled as well, they cannot openly go and tell the people, listen, this is what happened, what's happening, we've got a problem on our hands. We are kind of helpless in this situation. By getting to a point where enough people know about it, because people are talking. I mean, I've been observing these movements and so on as well. And you can now walk around South Africa, and virtually, without fail, you'll find that more than 50% of the population are aware of what the banks are doing. Okay, so that's step number one. Once all these things come out, then it opens the door to government to say, okay, we are enslaved as you are. How can we work together to try and solve this problem? Because alone they cannot do it. By keep on controlling the people, they cannot do it. Yeah. So we have to bring the government and the people together, because when you look at things like the foreclosure of governments and so on, that's not going to change. They'll just ignore that in any case. But when government knows we are not here to try and prosecute them because of what has been happened. Even old Zuma, you know, the guy, he's a strange character. In the freedom fighting days, I suppose he did a lot of good, but then he got caught up in this corporate thing, and now he's receiving benefits and privileges from the wrong people, and that's through the control. That's the control that they have on him. But I don't want to look at a situation of punishment. If we start looking at revenge and all the rest of it, nothing will ever change. The government need to know that this is about dialogue. It's about peace. It's about finding solutions together, and about bringing that information back into public perspective, whether that's done through our national broadcaster, SABC TV. We are the people that paid for that. I don't care who actually owns or controls it at this point in time, but it's the people of this country and their taxes that paid for that. It's the same with inflation. It's not the rich people that are feeling it. Inflation is always affects the middle and lower income groups.
For sure.
And somewhere along the line, people have to become desperate enough, or they have to know what's going on. And when that goes on, the last thing we want is war. Every single being on this planet needs to be protected, whether they've been guilty of being manipulated and they're at the head of government or not. Every single person, every life must be respected. Yes. And I think this is what we need to get to. We need to get to talk. We need to get to dialogue. There is more than enough history written of the world over thousands of years to be able to understand what works and what doesn't work. And it's like you get all the, if you take the Illuminati structures and the people in control, some of them will say, yes, but we want to control because if we control you guys as slaves, then things will actually work out. This is not the case, because the planet's being destroyed because of the fiat paper currency. You have to have a continuously growing economy in order to feed the debt that has to be serviced. If these people claim to be so highly intelligent, why don't they? Because their money has been created through the manipulation of people and at others' expenses, at the expense of other people. So everything gets created at the expense of other people. If they claim to be so brilliant, then certainly they can come and sit around a table and they can work out a system where there will always be a win-win situation. If they cannot do that, because I don't claim to be of genius intellect, but if they can do things like that, then, and they are the ones that claim that they are superior intellect, well then come and sit down and bloody well work out something that will benefit people and can be instituted for future generations. Don't come and say, well, I am superior to you, therefore I need to be in control of you. I mean, the wars have not been fought, have not been instigated by the people. The wars have been instigated by those in control.
Yeah.
And these are the things that need to be looked at. We need to look at a certain amount of, bringing a certain amount of philosophy into it and get people to ask questions and get people to start thinking.
I personally don't. I think you're very, very optimistic about the government working together. Looking at the control structures, just purely from my own observations and research, and I could be completely wrong, they are subservient to the ultimate powers. You want to call them the Babylonian cult, the Roman cult, whoever, the people that ultimately control the world through the Vatican. And the simple fact is, our current president, Jacob Zuma, has recently been knighted. Nelson Mandela is a knight of Malta, knight of St. John, as was Thabo Mbeki. And they actually, if they don't serve these people, they get taken out. That's what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. That is why he was taken out, because he actually did. He turned around and wanted to give Africa a gold-based currency called the gold dinar. And he was a knight of Malta. And because he betrayed the oath to serve the Vatican, they killed him. And I want to share this with you quickly. It's an extract from George Orwell's book, 1984. And this is the reason why I don't believe the people that control us will ever come together to work with us. I just want to read this to you. It's from page 190. It goes, but it was also clear that an all-round increase in wealth threatened the destruction of hierarchical society. In a world in which everyone worked short hours, had enough to eat, lived in a house with a bathroom and a refrigerator, and possessed a motor car or even an aeroplane, the most obvious and most important forms of equality would have already disappeared. If it became general that wealth would be conferred on all with no distinction, it would of course be possible, no doubt, to imagine a society where wealth in the sense of personal possessions and luxuries should be evenly distributed, whilst power remained in the hands of a small privileged caste. But in practice, such society could not long remain stable, for if leisure and security were enjoyed by all alike, the great mass of human beings who are normally stupefied by poverty would learn to think for themselves, and once they had done this, they would sooner or later realize that the privileged minority had no function, and they would soon sweep it away. In the long run, a hierarchical society is only possible on the basis of poverty and ignorance. And this is the reason why they keep South Africa poor.
Absolutely. I agree. And, you know, that is why I think the advent of the internet is such a great tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that is one way of reaching masses of people. And is there a sudden awakening? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a gradual, and I don't believe that there's going to be some amazing awakening. You know, we're going to wake up one day and everybody's going to know. I don't see that. I don't see that happening either. So all that we can do, that I can see is feasible, is start to spread the word, chip away. The more people that are chipping, the more people will eventually know that they are empowered,
yes,
that they have the power.
I agree.
In order to now tell government, well, we don't need you, or get out of there, or we are going to create a structure that cannot be manipulated in this way anymore.
Yes. Well, let me just say that having done this for some time. When I first started, I went out to South Africa in 2010 trying to raise awareness. It was like hitting my head against a brick wall. The upsurge just in like the last year and a half of people in South Africa waking up, and it's got a lot to do with the work that Scott and Michael have done as well. They've raised awareness, but also people coming on to find my work and finding work further afield of other journalists internationally, getting on the internet and looking more. What I would say is I at first was also like, I was feeling the same way you did for many years, but I can honestly say the last 18 months I've seen that curve on the graph just suddenly shoot up. And I'm more hopeful than ever that we are able to now somehow reach a kind of critical mass where enough of us know the truth for us to actually do something about it and make a difference.
And that's exactly it, Mel. It's people like you and Scott and Michael Fillinger and Heather and Theo, all of them, that have actually given me the insight and the courage to now step forward and say, you know what, I'm not going to bury my head in a whole armed society and go and not speak to anybody anymore. I'm actually going to come out, and I'm going to try and do whatever I can in order to expand on the knowledge that's out there.
Yes.
And
for sure.
And it's like that's exactly it. I mean, and we know also that there have been people that have been doing this for decades already.
Mm.
So I have a serious amount of hope. Whether the government come and talk to us or not, I believe that eventually, with all that you're doing and everybody else is doing, we will get to that critical mass that you've just explained that is growing now exponentially.
Yes, well, I can see it. I see it in the numbers. The numbers do not lie. The visitors to our site, the numbers of people, more and more people watching our vids than they used to. Also, we get, you know, the YouTube, one thing about YouTube, they love their statistics, eh? And you get a breakdown of which countries are watching and, you know, all of that. Loads more people every month from South Africa. Let me tell you, I'm ever more hopeful. Spoke to Anthea this morning, and, you know, I just listened to that woman and her voice and the way she speaks. Here's this woman, she's going to court on the 10th. She's got not an ounce of fear in her. Nothing. She's so positive and so vibrant and so enthusiastic that I have to, something inside of me just goes, you know what? It's because of people like this that I believe, you know, people like yourself. Enough people come out and say something. It encourages others and it gives others hope, and that is so important for me more than anything, is to encourage others. As you've said, as we've encouraged you, you encourage others.
This is it. I mean, I had an interesting feedback from a new person that's come onto my journey today. And you know, what I ask on the journey is, you know, how can you make a difference? And one of the things you can do is just put down the names of 3 people that you know with their email addresses so that they can link onto the journey and become more self-aware of what is actually going on. And this guy said to me, well, you know, can't I just send you the names of the people and then you contact them? And I can also understand people's reluctance because they say, well, do I want my name? But you don't have to be afraid that people are going to think anything of you. This is the other thing I wish people would understand. Don't worry about what other people think of you.
Yeah, exactly. We've had this discussion before. I agree, Sid. You know, and I often say I don't bother to explain myself anymore because people believe what they want to anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this to me is one of the essence. You know, if you want change, if you are unhappy with government, if you are unhappy with the way things are, if you are finding life more and progressively more difficult as the decades go on, you know what? Put your friends' names on the list. Let them participate. Let them judge for themselves whether I'm cuckoo or not. But it doesn't really matter.
I tell you, it's not that you're cuckoo. And you know what South Africans are like. And there's a real camaraderie. Like, you get a group of guys together, and it'll just take one of them to shut your idea down, and they're all calling you cuckoo and mad. And it's not because you're cuckoo and mad. It's because they feel threatened that what you're saying could threaten their reality. Basically, there could be a potential that what they know is not right. And let's face it, the average South African man is still very ego-driven. We are still a little unevolved in terms of that. I definitely find there's a schism there between people in South Africa and people in and the European men, definitely. But it's the same in Australia. Yeah, there's a real ego-based, and it's fueled by the beer bokke boerewors culture. You know, of having to be the man and having to be right, and you know, you don't want to be showing up to be a fool in front of your mates and be wrong with this, and you know, so all you do is, if you are going to look like a fool, you run down the guys making you look like a fool by calling him crazy.
Oh, I know the feeling exactly. I was down in, I went and climbed in Drakensberg about 8 years ago, and I came down to Cathedral Peak, and I went to the hotel to have something cold to drink. And there were a whole lot of guys drinking their beers, talking about rugby and all the rest of it. And I ordered a beer, but I also ordered a Coke, because I don't like just plain beer. I like Coke. It's nice to have a shandy. And the next thing, these guys were just pointing and laughing. But one guy was actually brave enough to stand up and said, you know what, you like that, so hey, I respect the fact that you're actually drinking it the way you like it, even if you don't drink a solid beer. So,
yeah, that whole laugh and point culture is terrible. It's terrible. I've experienced that exact similar situations myself with certain things, and you know, restaurants and all sorts. And my dad taking the sales staff out, all the men, all the boys out. I happened to come and join them for a drink, and there they are taking the piss out of a table of Chinese tourists. This is at the Cape Town waterfront. Taking the piss out of a bunch of Chinese tourists who've ordered more rice than they can possibly eat. Okay, and of course, this is what they eat in China. Okay, they eat a lot of rice. So my dad and they were like pointing and laughing outright. And of course, having lived abroad, I just stood up and I said, okay guys, it's funny, now I'm drawing a line, enough. And when I did that, they did it more just to get at me, because I knew I was bothered by the fact they're being so ignorant and pointing and laughing at people just because they were doing something different to what they were doing. Like something so stupid as ordering more rice. You know what I mean?
Yes. Those words are interesting because you are being so ignorant. I mean, who is actually ignorant at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, yeah, we still have a long way to go in society. But I think ultimately what everybody is doing is contributing greatly. And I would love to see that exponential curve of yours and visitors to your website increase, you know, fourfold. And yeah, I think it's freedomcentral.info.
Yes. It's not, you know, I tell you where I've recently seen just how the interest in South Africa is. My film, The Last of the Boers, has been one of the fastest viewed films pieces we've put out in a long time. I mean, within the first 6 days, it got like 6,000 views.
Wow.
So for me, again, it's a sign, yeah, that there is an interest in people in South Africa waking up. And you know, I've got lots of good documentaries that I've got planned. Sid, you're gonna love it. Actually, I might even use some of your vocal, like I did with the other one, in one of them. But I want to do a documentary about Cecil John Rhodes and that whole the Oppenheimers, and you know, you were talking about it earlier, what Carol Quigley talks about. I really want to focus a bit in on that, because there are researchers who touch on it, but you actually have to be from South Africa and passionate about South Africa to put more detail in. Most people just really touch on the Africa stuff, yeah? And I really want to bring this home for people in South Africa. Because, you know, when I started doing this research, people were saying, yes, you know, we've heard about this, we've watched Zeitgeist, we know about the Skull and Bones, we know about the Illuminati, but, you know, South Africa's, other side of the world, totally different. I'm like, you know what, that is the most ignorant statement, because to me, South Africa is the most obvious example of what's wrong with the world. With the widest gap between rich and poor, with the securitizations and all the stories going on in the banks. You know?
Absolutely. We were one of the first countries in the world to actually go into the system.
Yeah.
To become part of that. I mean, Rhodes was integral in that. our gold and our natural resources, gold, diamonds, all those natural resources that we used to create and prop up economies in the past.
Yeah.
A lot of that came out of South Africa. And this is what people don't realize. We have got a history that is so tied into the existing controls through the Federal Reserve, Bank of International Settlements, IMF, World Bank, and all the links are there. Everything is, the proof is there, the evidence. I was so glad when I saw your movie on the Boers that you actually popped into view good old Harry Oppenheimer and Nicky Oppenheimer, because here are guys that are living. I mean, Nicky Oppenheimer is alive today. Anglo, these are the guys that are around now that are very much part of this control mechanism.
For sure. I've got to do, as I said, I wanted, you know what, my script for The Last of the Boers was double of what I had to cut it down to. And I actually, the only reason I popped the guys in there just briefly was because I didn't want to leave them out completely. But trust me, I had so much more to say on them. It's a whole new documentary. So I am going to be doing a bit of a sequel to The Last of the Boers, which won't be called, you know, sequel to Last of the Boers, but it's going to really cover that. And I think, you know, I've been talking to Tina van der Waard, who's homeschooling her kids, and she's been asking me about, you know, syllabuses and stuff for the children. And I've always sort of liked the concept of Masifundisami, the Zulu concept of let us teach one another, where, you know, we interview, we research, we create material, we put it online, and it's there for our children. You know, we're in an age now where we don't have to rely on teachers and chalkboards to educate our children. We can choose material for them to view.
Absolutely. And
so,
then they will follow their own interests. They will expand on their own interests naturally. It's again, it comes down to that the natural law, the law of natural selection. You know, you choose what are you really passionate and interested about, and that's how you develop. That is how you become and get to do something that you love to do as an adult.
Yes, exactly. And I'm so, I'm absolutely so thrilled that we're in a situation now where we're able to create material for young children to watch and learn the truth and not be fed the garbage and the lies that we were fed in history classes at school.
Exactly. I mean, those are the lessons that we should be teaching our children. And I mean, the whole educational system, people are so limited by their education. I'm not talking about because you've only got to standard 6. I'm talking about the people with degrees, because the degrees, again, comes through a lot of the Rhodes scholarships. What's taught in universities was what they want us to know, what Rhodes wanted us to know, what Andrew Carnegie wanted us to know. I mean, he was bought out by J.P. Morgan, I think, 1906. And between 1906 and his death in 1919, he spent most of his fortune, and he was bought out at the time for just around $500 million in the beginning of the last century. That's a huge amount of money. He set up education systems and financed education systems in order to let people now control what people are learning. Rhodes has done the same, and this is stuff that needs to be taught. How do we prevent things like that? That's what we need to look at when we start looking at re-establishing a new system of living.
I agree, absolutely. And it starts with us, each and every one of us.
Yeah, absolutely, Mel. And I'm delighted to now be able to at least participate actively in this, and be part of it.
Yeah.
And I can see from the many emails that are coming in since I started my journey over the last couple of days. There are many people now that have started coming on to join it. I mean, today alone I've had potentially 50 people that have joined the journey.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And more coming on as we go along, you know. And this is the power of the internet. And if people can just realize that you know, put the names of any 3 people that you know on the list. Let me email them and let's see if they're interested in joining the journey. And they do 3, and it just expands exponentially. And very soon, sooner than you know, we can actually be in a position in this country where we could have educated enough people in order to start doing something constructive for the government.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Even if they refuse to talk to us, well, someone's going to. That's all I can say.
Yeah, indeed. Oh, well, I think we're going to leave it there, Sid. This has been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much. And let's do some more. You know, it's been wonderful just to share an experience, your experience, really, and to get an idea of what it's like on the ground in South Africa at the moment. And I just listen to you, and I love your very, 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 very South African accent. And I hear the words, and it warms my heart, because it gives me hope, and it makes me think, you know what? There are people out there who are getting it, man, and they're getting in my home country, and things, I reckon, they will change.
Well, thank you, and I can just say thank you very much for the support that you've given people like myself. I know what you've done for Michael and Scott and so on as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's invaluable. Even though you are South African, that will never change.
No, you know what? You never take the culture out of me. And you know what I know? It's actually when I'm dancing. You know, when I dance and I go out and I go to the nightclub, whatever. I used to dance with my maid's kids, yeah, with our house cleaners' kids, and the way they dance, it's part of my culture. That's how I move my body. When I close my eyes, I'm dancing with those little kids again. You know, I dance like I stomp my feet like I'm doing gumboot dancing kind of thing. You know, I do it. I dance like a Zulu woman. I'm a white Zulu woman on the dance floor, and people, they love it. And I make noises and and I just do. I let go. And you know, that's Africanness in me. When I'm freeing myself and just moving around and having fun in the music, what comes out is my African culture. So,
and you know, that African culture, to me, the people of Africa are amazing.
For sure.
I have traveled to various countries around Africa. I work with Zulus down in KwaZulu-Natal, and inherently they are the most beautiful people.
Yeah.
We don't need all the. I find them much easier to relate to it, and they are friendly. They are, and all they need is to be treated and know that they're also cared for. And they're the most amazing. They're the most amazing bunch. I haven't travelled outside of Africa for many years, probably more than 20 years now. Every time I go anywhere, I go into Africa. It's the land of my birth and the continent of my birth, I should say, and I love the people there.
For sure. Let me just say that unfortunately the black people of Africa have been made to feel like they are unworthy of our love. And they're not. They're not. They've been degraded and humiliated and detribalized and turned into criminals and rogues because of a society that's sick and has not loved them and disrespected their culture, detribalized. You know, I understand sometimes why they have this inherent hatred for the white people, but it's not, you know, I think to point fingers at all white people, we're not all bad. Some of us really genuinely are trying to make the world a better place, not just for me, for everybody. You know, that's all colors. And I tell you, when I went home to South Africa in 2010, I have to agree with you. Some of the best times I had was actually talking to the natives and the locals. And I remember I friendly with this one waiter at this one restaurant I used to go just have coffee and do, because they had free internet. And you know, I was chatting to him one day. He's a Zulu guy, and then the next day he knew I was coming regularly. He brought in his wedding album to show me his wedding photos of how a traditional Zulu wedding looks like. You know, I was blown away. You know, I mean, how many people do that to complete strangers? You know, bringing the wedding album to show them. But he was so taken by the fact that I was interested in his culture, and I was asking him about, you know, Dr. Credo Mutwa, if he knew him, and all sorts. Because at that stage, I was out there with another film, doing another, filming some more documentaries.
Okay.
So, and that's how I got chatting to him, and I was. The social warmth is something we can really envy in the native Africans, and it's something that they haven't lost, no matter what has been done to them. You know, it's a beautiful thing. So
I think this is it. I mean, the most beautiful thing about the native culture is that they are not deceptive. They are they are genuine in what they are, what they feel, how they react. They don't try to be something in order to impress. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to find that within the white culture. I tell you what, it's different within your upmarket white culture in South Africa. Everyone's trying to impress everybody else. Everyone's so worried about what everyone else thinks, and everyone has an external locus of identity where they only value themselves if they're liked by others. It's very sad. It's a schism in the psyche of the white South African. It's brought about by MTV coma culture. I'm telling you, and unfortunately, these black people haven't grown up in South Africa, maybe have not been exposed to that much of it because they've not had electricity and whatever else, so they're not tainted by it. Yet we, the sort of more upmarket, civilized, like more affluent white society will look down at them and call them uncivilized, whereas actually it's us. We are the ones who are detached from our humanity.
We have become completely. I mean, since when do you put material wealth, looks, education above that of a human being?
Yeah.
Because this is what's become of our society. I am better than you because I've got more money, I've got a higher education, and etc. And how can you actually justify that?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't.
Does that make you better?
No. Does it make me happy every time I come out of the gilded mansion that I've been locked behind under Umhlanga Rock and I walk into the streets and see these children begging? Do I feel better than them because I'm driving in a BMW and they have to scrounge for their food? No. It makes me feel worse.
Absolutely. And yet a lot of people just look the other way.
Yeah.
It's easier to ignore than to do.
But how can they? I don't understand how people can look the other way. That's what I mean. Again, the detachment of humanity. But that is drummed into us in South Africa. Think about it. The average South African with money actually probably does look the other way most of the time because the attitude is we can't help them all. There's just too many of them.
Exactly. And it's not true.
No.
It just is not true.
It starts one by one.
And I mean, if we just have a look at government waste, I mean, in 2010, that's another report that went missing, or that they've taken the link off the media's internet site. Was the report of the Auditor General's report of $24.8 billion being wasted by government in 2010. 24.8 billion. I mean, you can feed the whole of South Africa for a year on that.
Yes, of course.
You might not feed them crayfish and stuff, but you can feed them, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we've got kids and people going hungry and going to bed at night. I mean, I had a kind of adopted kid down in Sidwana, and him and his 5 siblings, they were at many nights, they would go to bed. Before I knew about this, they would go to bed on a glass of sugar water. That was it. They had nothing to eat. Oh. But they could go and buy sugar and they had water and they made some sugar water and that's what they took to bed with them. And people throw food out by the droves. They waste, and it's just, to me, absolutely incredible.
It never gets easy to listen to stuff like that, eh?
Yeah. I would like to just ask you, because again, I think that you've been doing so much work on this Vatican stuff, and I think it's the, what do you call it, the
the International Tribunal to Crimes of Church and State.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't you just want to, I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but don't you want to just give people a quick rundown on what is going on there? Because, if this thing goes out, then at least it incorporates the work you're doing as well.
Yeah, well, the International Tribunal into Crimes of the Church and State is basically run through the Common Law Courts of Justice, the International Common Law Courts of Justice, which was set up by my very dear friend, Reverend Kevin D. Annett, who has basically exposed the church from the inside, himself being, clergy. And having experienced the worst of church corruption. I mean, you know what you said earlier about some people going to government genuinely want to make a difference. This is a man who had a spiritual calling, who went into the church wanting to make a difference. And same as a lot of doctors who have a natural inclination to be healers, and pharmaceutical medication is the only way they find to fulfill that, you know. They don't find the natural path. There's so many of us with such good intentions, not all priests and are rapists, but a good example, Kevin Annett is exposed to church from the inside. He has got so qualified with all his degrees, and he's been stripped of all of them by the Vatican. But with this, he's gotten education far enough to actually bring together a court case and look at all the evidence regards to the genocide in Canada, which he's exposed single-handedly on an international scale. And he will be here in mid-May, and he is helping me put together the case for genocide in Africa. The causes, the Sutus, the Boers, the Nama, the Herero, all the major genocides. We're going to take the evidence and put it before the International Tribunal. And we are in fact looking for volunteer citizen jurors to look through all the evidence. I mean, it's a lot. It's, I think, probably 1,000 pieces, so it's no small task. But I will be putting out an advert for volunteer citizen jurors. I was a volunteer citizen juror in Kevin Annett's first case for Canada, so I know what it entails if anybody wants some information and advice on that. But this case I'll be basically being the prosecuting party, as Kevin was on behalf of Canada. I'll be doing this on behalf of South Africa and running it through the ITCC here in Brussels.
Wow, that is phenomenal. And how can people learn more about that?
Well, there is so much work. I mean, I'm constantly putting out bits and pieces about it. But the most important thing to do is just check out the website, which of course is rtccs.org. And that is the website with all the information about the International Tribunal to Crime to the Church and State. And then we actually built a little, when I say we, Freedom Central, myself and my husband have a little web building company that keeps us going. We built Kevin a little addition to that website called itccs.tv, which was a unique independent TV channel that accompanies the .org website, because YouTube kept deleting the court proceedings. Okay, so we built him a separate independent channel, so that is there attached to the website. So we've got a separate channel completely independent of YouTube for the airing of all the proceedings that we will be doing for South Africa. So it's there for everyone to view, and just keep up with it. That's all I can say. It will go fast, but it's all there. Everyone can view the evidence online. It's completely open. It's completely transparent process. And we ask the world to have a look. And anybody who wants to get involved as a citizen juror, I will obviously swear them in, record it, swear them in, and then I will be sending through instructions and getting people to look at the various bits and pieces of information over time. And when the date comes for the verdict, I'll get everyone to send in their verdict, and then we film it, put it online, and then it's up to the people to enforce whatever verdict is drawn.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, then I can just tell people, note the media control. YouTube delete things that they don't want you to know about.
Yeah.
The government, now that they've received my letters, have had links deleted through major media channels, Forbes, Guardian and Mail, and various other places. The Universal Postal Union have removed a link showing their collusion with the United Nations. I thank you, Mel, because if people out there that are now listening to this can just realize, if what I am doing doesn't excite you, you might find that what Mel is doing excites you, so join her cause.
Do you know what? It's not my cause or a cause. Let me just say, so the problem I have found with this whole freedom movement thing is there have been too many different fronts. What I love, the thing to me about OPPT, the most valuable thing, if nothing else, is how many of these beautiful people is brought together. I mean, Anthea, Michael, Scott, all of us come together in that discussion forum the other day. How wonderful was that? Just bringing all the freedom friends together is the most important thing, because it's not my cause, it's our cause. Ultimately, my freedom is tied up in the freedom of the planet, which is tied in with everybody else.
I stand corrected.
No problem. No, again, I love it. I love it that you want to make me own this whole thing. But gee whiz, I can't take ownership of it. It's too big. It's too big a responsibility, and it wouldn't be fair because there's been so many people, so many beautiful people have contributed to this, and it's a beautiful thing to be a part of. So yeah, thank you for being a part of it, Sid.
That is probably just not phrased well. It's a pleasure, Val. It's just that. I suppose that there are certain things that excite people more than other things, and I'm just hoping that even if people aren't very excited by my thing, they're excited by your thing. Okay.
Well, that film I put out really should get people excited because it's controversial, hey? That should get people going, and it's getting around. And as I said, almost 1,000 views a day for the first week. I couldn't ask for any more than that for a South African themed film. I mean, wow. So let's just keep the message and the love flowing, and hopefully people will eventually all catch up and catch on.
Well, I've been copying yours onto other people's computers with Flash and telling them they have to look at it. They're South African. It's real history, not history as beholden by the winners of the last war. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. All right, let's end this off. So thank you very much for your chat, and we'll catch up again soon.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
All right, you're welcome. Take care, hey.
Cheers,
then. Bye.
Okay, cheers.